People ask, why are Adventist people God's favorite? But let's be clear, God has no favorites the way man thinks of favorites. He is no respecter of persons. He doesn't pick one group because of their skin, their culture, or their denomination. No, God's love is universal. But listen closely. God does favor those who walk in His truth, who keep His commandments, and who remain faithful even when the world turns against them. And this is where the Adventist people step into the picture. From the beginning, God has always had a remnant, a people who stand when others bow, a people who shine when darkness covers the earth, a people who value obedience over convenience, truth over tradition, and loyalty over compromise. The Seventh-day Adventist movement was born out of that same spirit of loyalty, to lift up Christ, to proclaim His soon return, and to remind the world that the Sabbath, the seal of God, still stands. God favors obedience. He favors truth. He favors those who carry the everlasting gospel into every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. The Adventist people have been called to stand in that prophetic gap. They are not favored because of their name, but because of their mission. They are not loved more than others, but they are chosen to bear a message others have abandoned. Think of Noah. When the world mocked him, God favored his obedience. Think of Daniel. When Babylon demanded worship, God favored his loyalty. Think of the apostles. When Rome persecuted them, God favored their courage. In the same way, God looks at a people who lift up His word above tradition, who honor His Sabbath above man's decree, and He says, "These are my witnesses." That is why the Adventist people, though small, carry a message with global impact. But here is the key. Being God's favorite is not about pride, it's about responsibility. If you carry the last day truth, you carry the last day accountability. God does not call a people to boast. He calls a people to serve. He calls them to stand as lights in a dark world, as watchmen on the walls, as heralds crying out, "Fear God, give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come." So yes, God has poured out His Spirit on this people. He has entrusted them with prophecy, with the Sabbath, with the truth of the second coming. That does not mean He loves others less. It means He expects more from those who have been given more. Being God's favorite is not about being special. It's about being faithful, and that is the call Adventists carry. So let the world scoff. Let tradition rage. Let Rome decree. God is looking for a people who will remain true. And as long as Adventists cling to the Bible above all else, as long as they lift up Christ and not a church, as long as they carry the banner of truth into the final conflict, then yes, they are God's chosen people for this hour in history, not to boast, but to bear witness, not to claim superiority, but to walk in humility, not to exalt themselves, but to exalt the Lamb. Because in the end, the ones God favors most are the ones who say, "Not my will, but yours be done." Adventists carry a prophetic mission, not just a name. Adventists are not defined by a mere title or a denominational label. The power of the Seventh-day Adventist movement lies in the prophetic mission entrusted to it, not in the name written on a church sign. Anyone can wear a name, anyone can claim a heritage, but only those who stand on the prophetic word and live out its calling embody the purpose God intended. The very rise of Adventism was not a man-made invention, but a fulfillment of prophecy. It was born out of an urgent cry that the hour of judgment had come, that Christ was soon to return, and that the world needed to prepare. This mission was not given to make a people proud, but to make them servants of truth, watchmen on the walls, and heralds of the everlasting gospel. The book of Revelation speaks of a remnant who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. That is the core identity of Adventism. The name is secondary, the mission is primary. A prophetic mission means more than holding unique doctrine. It means standing in the flow of history as part of God's unfolding plan. Just as Israel was chosen to carry the oracles of God, Adventists have been chosen to proclaim the three angels' messages to a world in crisis. This mission is global, urgent, and eternal. It transcends the boundaries of denomination and compels every believer to see themselves not as members of a club, but as messengers of heaven. But with mission comes responsibility. Too often people wear the name, but neglect the mission. They sit in pews but forget the prophecy. They defend the institution but abandon the gospel. To carry a prophetic mission means to embody it in word and in life. It means to resist compromise, even when the world mocks. It means to be faithful to God's Sabbath, even when legislation enforces Sunday. It means to proclaim Christ soon return, even when others scoff at the delay. The name Adventist should remind every believer of their calling, to live in readiness, to sound the alarm, to point people to Christ and His truth before it is too late. Prophecy has always shaped God's chosen movements. Noah carried the mission of warning the world of a flood. Abraham carried the promise of a nation through which all the world would be blessed. Moses carried the law and the sanctuary system to point to the Messiah. The apostles carried the gospel across the Roman Empire at the cost of their lives. And today Adventists are entrusted with prophecy concerning the end of time, the rise of false worship, and the final conflict over God's commandment. This is no small assignment. It is the final phase of God's work on earth. That is why Adventism cannot be reduced to culture, heritage, or name. It is prophetic in its DNA. The mission is to point people to Christ, to call them out of Babylon, and to prepare them for His return. The mission cannot be compromised for popularity, softened for comfort, or hidden to avoid conflict. If it is, then the movement loses its very reason to exist. God does not raise up people for titles, He raises them up for truth. So when we say Adventists carry a prophetic mission, it means they bear the weight of history on their shoulders. It means they are called to proclaim a message that will not be welcome in the halls of power, but that will shine in the hearts of the faithful. It means their voices must not be silent, for silence is betrayal. It means their mission is not to exalt a church brand but to exalt Jesus Christ as Lord of the Sabbath, Lord of creation and Lord of salvation. Adventists who understand this calling know that their purpose is larger than themselves. Their mission is not confined to pulpits or pews. It is lived out in daily obedience, in bold proclamation, and in unwavering faith. The name may identify them, but the mission defines them. And in the end, when Christ returns, He will not ask what name was on their membership card. He will ask if they were faithful to the mission He entrusted them with. Those who carried the prophetic torch with loyalty will hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." The Sabbath marks a people set apart. From the very beginning of creation, the Sabbath was marked as a day unlike any other. When God completed His work in 6 days, He did not simply move on to another task or declare His creation finished without acknowledgement. He rested, blessed, and sanctified the seventh day. That moment was more than a pause. It was a divine seal placed on time itself. The Sabbath was established as a sign between the Creator and His creation, a mark that His people would always be set apart. To honor the Sabbath is to acknowledge God as the rightful ruler, the sustainer of life, and the redeemer of His people. It is more than a ritual. It is an identity. The Sabbath is not about idleness. It is about alignment. It is about setting aside the rush of ordinary life to stand in communion with the Maker. This holy day is not dependent on culture, tradition, or human decree. It was spoken by God, written with His own finger, and built into the very rhythm of the universe. In a world that constantly demands conformity, the Sabbath reminds God's people that they are not slaves to society, schedules, or systems. They belong to God, and that belonging sets them apart. Throughout history, the Sabbath has been a dividing line between those who honor God's authority and those who yield to man-made traditions. When Israel was delivered from Egypt, God reminded them that the Sabbath was not only a memorial of creation, but also a sign of redemption. They were no longer bound by Pharaoh's endless demands. They were free to rest in God's provision. That same freedom echoes down to every generation. The Sabbath whispers to the weary, "You are not defined by your work, you are defined by your God." In that rest, God's people find strength, identity, and purpose. But make no mistake, the Sabbath also requires courage. To keep it faithfully often means to stand against pressure, to resist compromise, and to walk a narrow path. It is not always popular to set aside business, sports, or social gatherings for the sake of honoring God's commandment. It was not popular for Daniel to remain faithful in Babylon, nor was it easy for the early church to resist Rome's cultural authority. Yet those who are truly set apart understand that God's favor is worth more than man's approval. They know that the Sabbath is not just about what they give up, it is about what they gain: the presence of God, the peace of His Spirit, and the strength to endure. In prophecy, the Sabbath takes on an even greater role. Revelation describes a final conflict where the issue of worship divides the world. The mark of the beast represents counterfeit worship and man's authority, while the seal of God rests upon those who honor His commandments, including the Sabbath. This is not a matter of convenience, but of conscience. It is about allegiance. The Sabbath will distinguish the remnant as those who stand under God's authority when the majority bows to human decrees. It is the line in the sand that reveals who is truly set apart. Yet the Sabbath is not a burden, it is a blessing. It is a weekly reminder that God provides, redeems, and sanctifies His people. It is a sanctuary in time, an oasis of peace in a restless world. It gives rhythm to faith, joy to families, and light to the soul. Those who embrace it testify, without words, that their hope is not in money, politics, or human strength. Their hope is in the Lord of the Sabbath, Jesus Christ, who declared, "Come unto me, and I will give you rest." The Sabbath marks God's people as distinct, not because they are better, but because they are surrendered. They are set apart, not by pride but by obedience. They are different, not because of culture but because of covenant. In a world chasing endless busyness and empty tradition, the Sabbath is God's eternal sign that His people belong to Him. And when the dust of human history settles, those marked by the Sabbath will be found standing, not by their own strength, but by the seal of the living God who set them apart from the very beginning. Responsibility comes with being chosen. To be chosen by God is both an honor and a weight. Throughout Scripture, whenever God selected a people, a prophet, or a messenger, He entrusted them with more than privilege. He entrusted them with more than privilege. He entrusted them with responsibility. Being chosen was never about superiority or favoritism. It was about stewardship, sacrifice, and service. When God calls, He does not simply hand out titles. He places a mission in the hands of those willing to carry it. With that mission comes accountability, and with accountability comes a responsibility that cannot be taken lightly. Israel's history proves this truth. They were chosen as a nation, not because they were the largest, strongest, or most righteous, but because God had a purpose for them. They were to be a light to the nations, a testimony of God's character, and a people through whom the Messiah would come. But being chosen also meant living differently, obeying faithfully, and carrying truth into a world steeped in idolatry. When they embraced this calling, they prospered. When they neglected it, they suffered the consequences. Their story reminds us that being chosen is not a guarantee of blessing without responsibility. It is a summons to faithfulness. The same is true today. Those who know the truth about God's commandments, who understand the importance of the Sabbath, who see prophecy unfolding before their eyes, carry a sacred responsibility. It is not enough to simply wear the name of Christian or Adventist, or to sit in the pews week after week. If God has revealed His truth to you, He has called you to share it, to live it, and to stand for it even when it is unpopular. Responsibility means that silence is not an option when souls are at stake. Responsibility means that compromise is not acceptable when the eternal destiny of millions hangs in the balance. When Jesus walked this earth, he reminded his disciples that to whom much is given, much will be required. Knowledge is a gift, but it is also a test. Light brings clarity, but it also exposes accountability. To be chosen is not to be lifted above others. It is to be placed in a position of greater duty. The early church carried the gospel into hostile lands, facing persecution and death, because they understood the responsibility that came with being chosen as witnesses of the resurrection. Their courage built the foundation of the faith we stand on today. In the last days, this principle becomes even clearer. Revelation speaks of a remnant who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. They are not chosen to boast, but to proclaim. They are not chosen to sit idle, but to warn a world rushing toward deception. Their mission is to sound the three angels' messages, to expose the lies of Babylon, and to lift up Christ as Creator and Redeemer. This is not an easy task, but it is a necessary one. Their responsibility is heavy, but so is their reward. Responsibility also means living by example. The world watches those who claim to serve God. If the chosen do not live differently, then the message they carry loses its power. God's people are called to be holy, set apart, and faithful. This means integrity, in private as well as in public, compassion toward others, as well as boldness for truth, humility as well as courage. The responsibility of being chosen is not only in what we preach, but in how we live. In the end, God will not measure us by the titles we held, the churches we attended, or the labels we wore. He will measure us by how we responded to His call, by how faithful we were with the truth entrusted to us, by whether we lived and proclaimed the message given for this time. Being chosen is an opportunity, but it is also a test. Those who embrace the responsibility with courage will shine as lights in the darkness. They will hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Those who neglect it risk hearing, "I never knew you." So let us remember, responsibility comes with being chosen. If God has opened our eyes to His truth, it is because He has chosen us to carry it. If He has marked us with His Sabbath, it is because He has entrusted us with His seed. If He has called us out of darkness, it is because He expects us to lead others into His marvelous light. The call is great, but so is the reward. To be chosen by God is to be entrusted with eternity. That responsibility is not a burden, but a sacred privilege, one that we must carry with humility, courage, and unwavering faith. God's true favor rests on faithfulness, not pride. God's favor has never rested on pride, position, or outward appearances. From the very beginning, His blessing has always been tied to faithfulness. When we look through the pages of Scripture, it is clear that God exalts the humble, strengthens the obedient, and pours out His Spirit on those who walk in loyalty to His word. Pride, on the other hand, leads only to destruction. Lucifer's fall began with pride. Babylon's collapse came through pride. Israel stumbled when they became proud of their identity rather than faithful to their mission. God does not delight in empty boasting. He delights in hearts that are surrendered to Him. Faithfulness is more than words. It is a life lived in obedience. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord because he was faithful in a corrupt generation. Abraham was called the friend of God because he faithfully trusted even when he could not see the promise. Daniel was favored because he remained faithful in Babylon, refusing to bow to idols or compromise with kings. None of these men were perfect, but all of them chose loyalty over pride, humility over arrogance, and obedience over convenience. Their faithfulness became the foundation upon which God built His testimony to the world. The danger of pride is that it blinds us to our need for God. It makes us trust in ourselves, our systems, or our religious identity rather than the living God. Israel, chosen to be a light to the nations, often fell into this trap. They boasted of being Abraham's children while neglecting the God of Abraham. They wore their name as a badge of superiority, forgetting that their calling was to serve the nations with truth. Pride turned their mission into entitlement, and entitlement led to their downfall. Jesus himself warned that God could raise up children of Abraham from stones, reminding them that pride in heritage means nothing without faithfulness to God. In the same way, no church or denomination today is favored simply because of its name. The Seventh-day Adventist people carry a prophetic mission. But if that mission is overshadowed by pride, boasting in their uniqueness, debating their superiority, or looking down on others, then they lose the very favor they claim. God does not honor empty words or religious labels. He honors hearts that remain faithful to his commandments and committed to his Son, Jesus Christ. What matters is not the name you wear, but the life you live. Faithfulness is not glamorous. It often requires sacrifice, separation, and standing alone. To keep the Sabbath when the world pressures you otherwise is faithfulness. To speak truth when silence is easier is faithfulness. To choose humility when pride tempts you to elevate yourself is faithfulness. This is what God sees, and this is what he blesses. His true favor rests on those who honor him in the hidden places of life, where no one applauds but heaven. It is in those quiet moments of obedience that God prepares his people for greater work. The end-time conflict will magnify this truth. Revelation reveals a world divided between those who bear the mark of the beast and those sealed by the living God. The difference will not be pride, it will be faithfulness. Those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus will stand, not because they claim to be chosen, but because they lived as chosen. Their faithfulness will shine brighter than titles or traditions. When the pressure comes, pride will collapse, but faithfulness will endure. God's favor is not earned by works, nor is it withheld because of weakness. It is given to those who cling to him with loyalty, even in their struggles. He favors the one who says, "Lord, I cannot, but you can." He favors the one who chooses to trust his word when the world shouts lies. He favors the one who bows low before him, for it is the humble he lifts up. In the end, the faithful will be crowned, not because they boasted, but because they believed and obeyed. So let us remember that pride has no place in God's kingdom. It is not pride that draws his smile, but faithfulness. It is not arrogance that secures his favor, but humility. The true mark of God's people is not how loudly they proclaim their chosenness, but how faithfully they live. Titles fade, institutions crumble, and human pride falls, but faithfulness will stand forever. Those who are faithful unto death will receive the crown of life. That is the assurance, the promise, and the eternal truth. God's true favor rests on faithfulness, not pride.